everyone to the NYC Workforce Drop. I'm Greg Morris, CEO of the New York City Employment and Training Coalition. Sometimes I start by saying, hey, where you are right now, thanks for listening to the pod. I mean that, of course. I want to tell you where I am right now, at the Manhattan Neighborhood Network. Shout out to my friends at Manhattan Neighborhood Network. This is a fascinating space in New York City. We are an avenue away from the Javits Center. And on this block, on 38th Street where we do this, there are, I don't know what to call it. There are buildings that definitely are in need of repair. There are businesses that are closed. There are horse carriages. And today there were horses trotting up and down the block. It also happens to be the same time as the auto show is going on. So the local cafe where I always start, Cafe Vento, which is right down the block where I always start, and I check in with them before I do the pod. I get my Americano. I have a very specific type of croissant that I like. That's my pre-pod routine. I do that. And I always kind of check in and start with, how's business? And with the auto show, business is good. On that note, I'm here at the Manhattan Neighborhood Network studio on West 38th, and I'm happy to welcome all of you because today, Christine Quinn is in the building. Christine Quinn, President and CEO of Women in Need. Now, you may know her as the former city council speaker, the first openly gay city council speaker, a true champion of the human services space, a relentless focus for not just now in this job, but in the past, on advocacy, on housing rights, the commitment she is making right now as the leader of WIN, the largest provider of both shelter and permanent supportive housing to homeless families with children. It's a substantial, impactful, and valuable space that she is in. And anyone who has spent any time with Chris Quinn, I think, would probably start by saying she is someone who is all about making things happen. And I hope during the course of this podcast, you get a sense of where that came from her. I think the podcast pulls back the curtain a little bit on some of what drove her as a child, some of what she experienced in terms of success and challenge in her political career. I think you get a little sense as well of what it is that she thinks advocacy really needs to look like. And she teed that up for us because she was on panel at the workforce development conference we had in December. She was on panel then. And when she was on panel then, she said a couple things, and I just want to highlight them for you now. She said something during the panel that was like, power really is everywhere, and the goal is to harness it. And she said, power doesn't necessarily mean having friends. It means you have respect. And it means that if folks understand that if they don't activate when you need them to activate, that you will escalate. She also said during our panel, know your facts. Because in city government, or as it relates to dealing with your funders, or as it relates to the private sector, at the end of the day, if you want people to do something, if you need them to do something, it's not enough just to say you want it. You got to say, this is why it matters. This is why it has value. That is about the emphasis, I think, on what it takes to make change. And she and I also get into a conversation about mobilizing and organizing. And mobilizing is about moments. Organizing is about creating a scaffolding, creating the on-ramps for something better to happen over time. I want you to be aware that I think during the course of this conversations, there's no shortage of gems. So if you got a notepad with you in your back pocket or you're listening on your phone, she's going to drop a handful. And I know I'm going to carry them with me from here on. One in particular is about feedback and failure. On that note, please welcome Chris Quinn. Chris Quinn, you are in the podcast space, Manhattan Neighborhood Network.
Love it.
welcome to the NYC Workforce Drop. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you.
By the way, congratulations. 10 years now?
Yes, I can't. It feels simultaneously like yesterday and like a century ago. So it depends on the day or the moment.
And I think it's important to note here, you, tremendous history in government. You had been an executive director before that.
Yes, I ran it was then called the New York City Gay and Lesbian Anti-Violence Project. It still exists. It's just called the Anti-Violence Project now. And it's a crime victims assistance agency and criminal justice advocacy organization for the LGBTQ community. So
you had done that, and then you go through this fantastic career in government. Now you find your way into WIN.
Right.
And I was doing a little bit of reading up. Actually, by the way, I looked too at your memoir.
You might be one of the few.
Hey, listen. Let's not undersell this. And it's the With Patience and Fortitude memoir. And as soon as I saw Patience and Fortitude, I was like, oh, this is a library nerd right there. That's what 1,000%. That's the name of the lions.
And the way you remember which lion is which is Fortitude is closer to 42nd Street.
See, listen, everybody on the podcast is noting that right now.
There you go.
Chris
In
Quinn
New
did
York
that for you. I love that. True story. The first time I was ever in a room with you, I was at the door.
Oh, okay.
See, I worked at the door for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
What a place to have started my career.
Right.
And I remember the word was Chris Quinn's coming. And it was with Lou Fiddler.
Oh, my God. May he rest in peace. May
100%.
his memory be a blessing.
Just beautiful. Yeah. So this is what I remember of you. Walking into center space. And by the way, I was at a level where I'm just tagging along. They don't want me to say anything. I'm just tagging along. If there's a question, I'm going to. And you came in, and I just remember you, I just remember like red boots or something.
I had some great red boots, which were super high heels, and I can't wear heels that high anymore because I'm old. My friend Annie told me, so my friend Annie was my fundraiser. She's still my friend. And she's on WIN's board now and chair of our fundraising committee, funny enough. So she's pregnant, and she's stuffing her feet into these 3 to 4 inch heels. I'm like, Annie, you look like Miss Piggy. This is terrible. Not her weight, her feet.
Right.
She's like, if you stop wearing heels, your feet will fall out of practice. So when I left government, I wore 3 inch heels every day at least. Ooh. Left government and wore sneakers and Uggs. And now my feet, she's right. She's right. So listeners, regardless of gender, if you're a high heel wearer and you have a reason to stop, don't stop. You'll never go back.
See,
I love those red boots.
We're 3 minutes in, and we're covering every piece of critical information. I remember the red boots, and here's what I remember about you, and Lufin. Here's what I remember about you. I don't remember you saying a lot. You came in, and it was very clear to me that you were like, this is serious. This is a person who comes in, and I have immense respect for public service folks in, there's a lot of challenges in terms of who is impactful in government, and I have a lot of respect. And I just remember watching you, and you were so like, I'm walking through, I'm seeing what I need to see. You asked a couple of questions, you nodded, and I saw the bosses at that time, Michael Zisser and others, sort of nodding. And it was like, I just remember them turning and going, we're good.
Yeah.
We're good. And what I thought about that as I was reflecting on it was, you were someone who was always on the move, I think.
Tried to be.
And I think in that space, you were looking for what you needed. And it might have been the case that at that time, you were thinking about the runaway homeless youth conversations.
Right. Absolutely.
And the young adults. Shout out to the door.
I remember that visit because, big shout out to the door. Lou Fiddler was a council member, a straight council member from like the Sheepshead Bay area of Brooklyn. So if you were to brainstorm, where do we go to find people who are going to fight to the death for homeless and runaway youth and LGBT kids shelter beds, you wouldn't say Sheepshead Bay. No disrespect to Sheepshead Bay, but you wouldn't. Lou, the reason that money existed at the level it does is because of the late Lou Fiddler. Yeah. He made it. He was chair of the youth committee. He was a large man, which he was not embarrassed to admit. And he used to say in budget negotiating teams, if you cut that money, you will do it over my fat, dead body. And people were just like, fine, we yield. But it was him, not the gay caucus. It was him. And I remember that visit because, one, I wanted Lou to get the accolades. I wanted Lou to get the attention. But I also wanted Lou to get more ammunition, so it wasn't just his fat dead body. He actually had more stories and stats. But the door, amazing.
Nothing like it. Nothing will ever be like it.
I agree.
And I'm very grateful for my history there. Yeah. And the next time, true story, I'm in a room with you after that. Years later, you're at Wynn.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's early on in your Wynn space, and I am sitting on a panel with you.
Mm-hmm.
With the New York the New York Junior League.
Okay.
And it's you, me, and Lou Zuckman from Scan is on it. And between you and Lou, I don't think I said a word.
We were like in a townhouse on the Upper East Side or something.
They had their things on townhouse.
It was very early in my Wynn days.
New York Junior League. And it was amazing. And you were, now this is you going from I'm the speaker and I'm holding it down and I'm focused to just you were in your zone.
Oh, that's funny.
And I think there may have been like a stand up, like a round of applause at the end, like a standing. And it was all you and your stories and your energy. And I turned to you. I don't think I said a word. I turned to you at the end and I was just going to be like, wow, it was amazing to see. And you were already gone. You were like, I literally was like, where did you just like drift in and then you like disappeared on to the next 12 other events you had to do?
An Irish goodbye. There's nothing like it.
The Irish goodbye. So I'm grateful that you're here with us now.
Thank you.
And I want to talk about Wynn and your work and how things have unfolded for you. If I could just start from this perspective, though, which is to say, is there anything looking back now 10 years in, is there anything that surprised you?
On day one, it surprised me, probably not day one, a little bit into it, how little most New Yorkers knew about homelessness. You know, and I say that through the prism of how little I knew about homelessness when I got the job. Because if you ask most New Yorkers, and we did some polling and whatever on this, they think that most homeless people are a mentally ill single man on the street. Why do they think that? Because that's the picture the New York Post and other media outlets use. Why do they use it? Well, because it's typically a person of color, so it's racist. And they use it to create, in my opinion, a sense of us and them and to scare us. But yes, there's mental health issues in the homeless or unhoused community as there are in the housed community. But 70% of the people in shelter are families with children. Now, I don't say that to say the singles don't need help. They do. But we don't put nearly enough proportional resources towards families with children, A. B, if people knew that reality, I think they would be a little nicer to the overall homeless service community, and maybe you wouldn't see, you know, hundreds and hundreds of people turning out as they did once in Staten Island when we were building a shelter there, where, you know, was kind of an event where like the police escorted me out. And the funny thing is, or the great thing is, about a year after we opened, the Staten Island Advance, the only borough with a daily paper, Staten Island, did an article about Wynn Shelter. And the only criticism the community had was we hadn't done nice landscaping. I'll take it.
You'll take it.
I'll take it.
You'll take it.
And then the St. George's Beautification Coalition donated planters and trees. So, you know, I think that was one thing right away, was that people didn't really know the real story, and we had to work to get that out there. I also was surprised when I started at how much, you know, animosity at that point there was towards the state government. People really felt like Andrew Cuomo wasn't doing enough for supportive housing, and having his history at HUD, I didn't expect that. I thought people were going to like see him, notwithstanding what happened later, but as a champion, you know, on those issues. The other thing that was really surprising was two parts of it. How in a silo the Wynn staff was on city government. So they knew the Department of Homeless Services. That's all they knew. So when we were dealing with landlords in our scattered site, which are apartments we rent for permanent supportive housing with services, they're crappy apartments. I mean, it's a terrible model, but it's a model we have because a lot of these people are slumlords. And so the staff would say, well, Mrs. Whomever's apartment didn't have heat or the water's not running. So I would say, well, why didn't we call code enforcement at the Department of Housing? And they were literally like, code enforcement.
What's code enforcement?
So I assumed that every WIN staff was very knowledgeable of city government and saw themselves as an advocate. They were advocates. They were advocates for their clients, but they were fearful about branching out. Like, well, if we call the city code enforcement on that landlord, he or she will never rent to us again. Well, who cares? Right? And they need our money. They want our money. So that took time, but I really think now we have a policy employee resource group. We had hundreds and hundreds of people at the Just Pay Coalition. So that's been gratifying to see my years of, when you have a meeting, you put out less chairs than you think they're going to be people. So it seems like the room is full.
Like it's full.
You're right. The reverse pyramid of how many people are going to show up at an event. All of those stupid trainings have come in very handy.
I heard you say that when you took the role, you said we're going to do policy and advocacy work. We're going to build that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I said to the board too, A, you're a great group when they were hiring me, but B, I want to do more permanent housing because that's ultimately the solution. And B, I want to do policy and advocacy. I want to build that. And if you don't want that, that's cool, but then you don't want me.
Do you get the sense that look, I'm grateful to have spent 30 years in human services in some capacity, oftentimes at the intersection of education and employment. For New Yorkers of different spaces, different needs, different interests, different vulnerabilities, different strengths. The people who do that work or people who are in this space are the most giving, loving, generous. The idea that you could work with someone and always think that the person I'm sitting across from who may be dealing with multiple barriers, challenges, a first, second, third, fourth, fifth chance, and you're still sitting there going, your potential is limitless and I'm with you all the way, right? What strikes me about that is that gets taken advantage of in some ways by virtue of how it is, I think, that the city pays its bills to human services. You flagged the human services space and the Just Pay Coalition. I think the other piece of this is that I think maybe it has sometimes cluttered our ability to be able to tell the story about why this work matters and what the value is, which is related to policy and advocacy. Do you feel that tension between I'm trying to do the service to be able to support the individual versus I'm trying to figure out how it is that we leverage what this is so we have the resources to keep going forward?
There is absolutely, a tension. And in some ways that tension is good, right? Because if you're me, given my history, given my interests, given the perch I sit at, you're like, push it, push it, push it. And then the case workers have a level of protective bubble they want to put around the clients. And sometimes that's needed. So there is that tension, and that's not a bad thing. But we also need to recognize that in doing the work, as hard as it is, and the people are so generous, there will be secondary victimization. And that's a real thing. And we do a lot of trauma-informed work at WIN with our staff. But that is not built into the contracts. You know what I mean?
No one pays you.
No one pays just to have staff who help other staff. And that's really, critical. And the incredible giving nature of social services staff, and I'll give you an example. So our vice president for supportive housing realized that, for people 14 to 24, 21, whatever, it's a terrible time, right? You give me $1 million, I wouldn't go back. And it's also a particularly hard time if you're your mom or because to be in supportive housing, you have to be chronically homeless. In our contracts, somebody who's a domestic violence survivor, substance misuse issues, mental health issues, or a young woman who's aged out of foster care with a child. So there's some challenges. Every house has challenges, but those are the challenges. So these young people needed more support. So the supportive housing staff created a mentor program for the some for girls, some for men, and for boys, and they just did it. That's extra hours, no extra money. That's extra work, no extra money.
We're just going to do the work.
We're just going to do the work. And that really speaks to it. But the great thing to speak about also just the giving nature of people in the larger world. I emailed yesterday John Calvelli at the New York Aquarium and said, our kids want to go to the aquarium. I need 30 free tickets. Okay. like that.
Yeah.
Like a fax came through. So it's all, a very giving community, which we're so lucky about. But I don't think the city, just to talk about just pay stuff for a second, realizes that. And I think they also take advantage of the giving nature by not giving appropriate salary levels.
Absolutely.
And, then you'll get dinged by the city if you have turnover. Well, you know what? We can't keep, in most cases, an MSW more than 2 years.
Yeah.
One, because they can go to a hospital or somewhere else and make a lot of money. And B, even if they went to CUNY, they have student loans from their master's degree.
That's right.
But the city assumes they're giving, they'll eke it out as long as they can, and then they'll just go somewhere else. And that's a terrible, terrible model.
And it's agonizing, having been in this work for a long time. I have immense respect. Shout out to every social worker, case manager, everybody who plays a role in this system, regardless of where you sit into it. Everyone's giving and committed and focused. The idea of someone who works as closely and intimately, professionally with a client and then has to make their own choices about their welfare, their salary, then now they're disconnecting from someone who probably has a history of disconnection.
Absolutely.
And that stuff is agonizing.
And
the pain and the guilt associated with that. You said two things I want to note for you. The face of homelessness in New York. I've heard you say a single mom and a 5-year-old.
Yep. The average age of a child in shelter is 5 years old. We house 7,000 people a night, half of whom are children. The average age is 5 years old. And the average length of stay in a New York City family shelter is 15 months. So basically, it's almost a quarter of a child's life.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest, if not the biggest indicator of whether someone's going to be a homeless adult is if they were a homeless child. And right now, the city contracts focus on what's called the head of household. 90% of the time, a woman, a mom. They don't focus on the children's services. So the things we have, like all next week when kids are on break, Camp Win, that's barely any city money. It's private funds. Now, mom isn't going skiing, right?
Yeah.
So if there isn't Camp Win, the children are too old for childcare on site, she may not have to work. I mean, she might not be able to work. But given all the work requirements now from the federal government and that you have to be working to get a child care voucher, which makes no sense because you can't get a job if you don't have child care, but that's another conversation. If there wasn't Camp Win, what mom would miss work or she would miss appointments. And when you're a homeless person, you have a lot of government appointments. Absolutely. So that it's important for a whole host of reasons. But in childcare, we run it in a trauma-informed model because if with these children who are in shelter, you don't begin to address the trauma of poverty, of homelessness, of domestic violence, of on and on, it will just fester and grow. But the city doesn't bake that into their model, which is part of the reason why we're at an all-time high of homelessness still and why you see so many people repeat homelessness. On average, when folks get to Win, they've been homeless or unhoused in some capacity 3 times. There's a debate going on now about housing vouchers. And the Citizens Budget Commission, a group for which I have a great deal of respect, did a report where they said, the vouchers were exorbitantly expensive and more expensive than shelter, which is bad math. But part of the reason it's bad math is they assumed homelessness was a one-time experience, not a repeat experience, which changes the number. At Win, we are proud that if we look back 2 years to people we placed in permanent housing, 93% of them still have not returned to shelter. But that's the exception, not the norm. And if you don't have services directed to children, it's just going to keep growing and growing as a problem. So that's why next week we have Camp Win. Any day school isn't in session, summer, all year long, we have Camp Win. It's a STEAM-based model. One day I went to visit and I said to a little boy, "Oh, you're playing with Legos." Maybe he was 8 or something. And he put his hands on his hips, turned his head to me and said, "I am doing architecture." I stood corrected.
Yes,
I stood corrected.
I receive that.
Exactly.
And I respect your architecture.
And next week, and I want to give a shout out to the Department of Education.
That's right.
We're doing these book bodega events at the different shelters. The DOE comes in with all kinds of books, free books, and all of these reading games and reading interactions, which have been, off the hook. They've loved them. And just this week, speaking of doing special things for children, what day is today? Thursday. I think on Tuesday.
I think it's Thursday.
I think it's Thursday. It's always the trickiest question. On Tuesday, we did a ribbon cutting at our East Harlem shelters with the Children's Museum of Manhattan. Oh, my God. What an amazing, amazing group. They have a wonderful museum. They're thanks to the generosity of Lori Tisch, one of the all-time great New York and American philanthropists. They're building a new building, but they do installations in places like Rikers, where the children visit, in homeless shelters. They unveiled this new interactive extravaganza at our shelter, and then also came in and did programming, and it's just an amazing partnership. And also thanks to Robin Hood, this is our second tranche. We're going to get one of these interactives in all 16 of our shelters.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's thrilling, and also
and you know what you saw when the kids were climbing and playing and doing this? Joy. And you saw we used to have a staff member, Miss Tammy. She moved to Florida, and I love Miss Tammy, and she used to say, our job is to create good memories. So when they look back on this part of their life, it isn't all sad. And there was this one little boy, we had taken the folks from CMOM into childcare, and he was hiding. He wouldn't come out. Oh. And then they had, it's like a parachute fabric, and they pulled it up and down. Everybody's seen it with kids. He was dancing and screaming and smiling, and it was joy. And every child, whether they're poor or rich or housed or unhoused, deserves joy. And that's what you saw on that little kid's face.
And that's what childhood is supposed to be like.
I'm
supposed to be able to find my way, feel safe, learn, play. Meet others.
This mentor program, one of the things we did, thanks to the Bloomberg LP, was take them for free to the Whitney to see the Amy Sherald exhibit.
Nice.
And Amy Sherald, if folks aren't familiar, is the woman who did the portrait of Michelle Obama. And she's an American realist. And I never really thought about this till I went to her exhibit. Every picture in American realism is of a white person, usually, often like an agrarian white person. And all of hers are black people, and often a lot of LGBT people. So the kids went, and when we asked them how the exhibit made them feel, one of the kids said, important. That's just priceless.
And that is critical as a family finds its footing.
Absolutely.
And if I understand the stats, as you noted, first year still out of shelter, 93%, and then year 2, I heard 92%.
Yes, that's right. I often
you're sticking.
Yep,
it's sticking.
Yep.
Your housing work. Actually, before I talk about your housing work for a second, I just want to note I saw this referenced in one of your press releases. More children sleeping in New York City homeless shelters than there are seats in Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, and tomorrow is opening day.
And tomorrow's opening day.
Yeah.
So I just that was startling. Right. Even though you see the numbers printed, there was something about what that particular what that meant. Yeah. Let's back up for a second. Your housing tenant work starts the Koch administration?
The end of the Koch administration. My parents had grown up in the city. My father part of the time in Ireland, and then my grandparents were in the city. But my parents in 1956, when my older sister was 2, went out to Long Island. As people did in 1956, bought a house sight unseen, and
we'll take it.
Exactly. And it was great, but. We bought a house where there was our block, which was a dead end. A street off of it was a dead end. My mother thought there wouldn't be a lot of cars. She was right. But they were suburban disasters. My father thought so my grandparents came out, they were from Ireland, they're half Druids. They planted all these trees. My father was a city kid. He thought the freaking Parks Department was coming and everything was overgrown. It was a hot mess. Once some kids came over and they said, "Oh, if you owned that vacant lot, you could have a pool." I was like, "That's the backyard." So, and my mother just was always in the city. She was like, "When are we moving back? When are we moving back?" So in my mind, after college, you didn't go anywhere but New York City. So I graduated in 88. In 88, I moved into the city, and I wanted to do
Trinity College
in Hartford, and where I got more credits in internships and independent study, basically hanging out at the State House. After I graduated, they put a cap on how many credits you could get from internships and independent studies. So they
learned something from you.
Yeah, exactly. But I learned a lot.
And you learned a lot, right.
But so I came in, I needed to be in the city, right? I needed to be in the city. So I took a job as an administrative assistant for the Friends of Channel 13, which were affluent women who raised money for Channel 13. And I lied and said I could type and all this stuff. But it worked out great because my boss on Fridays when I started was taking some class at NYU. So I would read everything I could get, newspaper, whatever, and make notes of people whose names reappeared involved in politics and social change and organizing. And then I would call them and ask them for coffee. And people called back because, I believe, at that time, Chris Glenn was a very high-ranking judge in the city of New York. So people would literally call back and say, "Your Honor." And I'd say, "No, it's not Chris Glenn, it's Chris Quinn." And
now you're on the phone.
And now you're on the phone, so you're like a schmuck if you won't talk to this kid. So I had coffee with everyone who would, because there was no, LinkedIn or whatever back in the dark ages. And then they would send me to people, and they would send me to people, and they would send me to people. And they sent me, the Association for Neighborhood Housing Development, which is amazing and still exists, had something called the Weekly Reader, which was mimeographed pieces of paper that were stapled and mailed out.
Yes.
And it had job notices. And that's ultimately through coffees and the Weekly Reader, I got a job at the Association for Neighborhood and Housing Development.
What drives you to be writing down names of people you see in the
I didn't know anybody.
Is that what it is?
I didn't know,
so this is a way to know people.
Yeah, I didn't know anybody. So, there was no internet, there was no anything like that. So I had done organizing work in college and right after college, and I would read the local papers, the weekly papers then, and make notes of people. I don't know. It just seemed like a decent way to identify people who were community leaders in areas that I was interested in. And, even still, now, obviously, with social media and other places, I'll make notes of people that I don't know. I mean, I'll go and follow them, but, people you got to go out and you got to do the human touch.
I have to say, when I read that in your memoir, I read the piece about the name, right? Someone, and I thought of my father, because my father's name is Dean Morris. So when he goes back to school as an adult, Schenectady County Community College, they thought he was a dean.
That's awesome.
So he would call people, and they'd be like, "The dean's on the phone," and he'd be like, "Yeah, I'll be the dean if that works."
That's awesome.
And to make it even more, build a connection, my father lost his mother to cancer.
It must have been terrible back then.
And I can only imagine, right? And as I was reading your book, the journey that you go through in your memoir, growing up, and some of the different sort of family-related challenges and complications, the idea of not speaking about things sometimes comes up a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that in my life, the limitations on any sharing, whether it's a serious medical issue, whether it's a family-related thing. And I read that was some of what I felt like I got from your memoir as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's a human condition, but I will half seriously, half joke and say it's an Irish Catholic condition that you forge forward. You
forge forward.
Yeah, you forge forward. You move on. There's no time for dwelling. What's din is din, as my paternal grandmother said, and would say, you just didn't talk about anything. And we've now come to understand that you're as sick as your secrets.
Yeah.
And they told me that my mother had a bad tooth infection that extended down, I laughed now, down her neck into her face, which was why she always wore men's tailored shirts buttoned to the top. But occasionally you could see the scarring from the mastectomy, which is still brutal, but was way worse in the 70s. Yeah. And, you know, when you're a child, anything that goes wrong, anything that is not on balance in your home, you believe is your fault.
You think it's yours.
Which is what happens with our children at Wynn. So she wasn't around. She was in the hospital. That was she left. You know, they didn't say she was in the hospital. She said she was other places, but that was something. I got sent to friends' houses. That was something. My mother also, in addition to having had breast cancer very early in the battle of breast cancer, was also, I now understand, mentally ill. And she was probably bipolar, so she had challenges and drank too much and did, you know, it was the 70s, so any woman who had any issues, God only knows what pills they gave them. Yeah. And so getting sick was even harder for her than it might have been, and you take that all on as a child, and you think that if you get perfect grades, or if you're beautiful, or if you're thin, it's going to be better. You know, it's this magical thinking. And since no one's talking about anything, you feel like you have to do something. And I remember once, it's now Northwell, but it was North Shore then. They had this amazing program where they would come to the house like in this ginormous van, and there would be social workers and doctors and nurses and blah, blah, blah. And they were in was the family room. My mother called it the playroom. And there was a hospital bed in there. So one group of people was taking care of her. Another group of people was in the living room, you know, the room you don't go in, and with me and my father. And they said, you know, is she depressed? And he said, well, yeah, she's sick and she has cancer. She's depressed. Has she ever been suicidal? And he said yes. And outlined this suicide attempt when she was, you know, a girl, I think about 18. Yeah. I had never heard that. Oh. I was about 16. Oh. It was never spoken of again. But what you're left with is I have to be extra good to not make that happen again. And so in this magical thinking, one of the things that'll be extra good is I'll be thin. But also, you know, which... having suffered from bulimia, that was part of it. But also, when things are so out of control, you desperately want to have control. So for me, being bulimic I was controlling something in my body, which gives you a sense of power when you're so powerless. But the not talk, which is why for me, having the children's programs at Wynn is so important, because they create ways that children can talk verbally, but they can talk in other ways. So, for example, we have a mural at one of our shelters in Brooklyn, and it's got 3 parts. And one part is where they came from, one part is shelter, one part is where they're going. So in the middle part, the shelter, they wanted to paint crowns on top because they wanted people to know this was a good, important, regal place. And that's a way for them to express also.
Right. A couple other thoughts from the memoir. True that your grandmother was on the Titanic?
Yes, my maternal grandmother, Nellie Shine, was on the Titanic. By some accounts, she was 16. By some accounts, she was 17. My father used to say, you know, when you were dealing with the English, you got every bit of paperwork you could get. And but needless to say, she was young. And her parents were dead, big family. Her sister had just taken in a baby orphan from the village and said to her, you know, Nellie, there's not enough money. You have to go to America to be with your brother and your cousin. So she and a cousin at Cove in County Cork got on the Titanic in steerage. So like from the movie, the people they locked in the bottom. And she never talked about it.
Right.
And we were told never to ask her about it. And in fact, my mother in 8th grade, they taught her about the Titanic, and they showed the kids in her class an article from the New York Times, and it had a list of survivors. And she went home and said, Mom, your name, someone with your name was on the list. Isn't that interesting? And her mother said, no, that was me. But weirdly, I don't know how this would have happened. She was quoted in a book about the Irish on the Titanic, and she said, when the other girls dropped to their knees to pray, I took a run for it. And I once rather cheekily said to a priest, well, I guess my grandmother knew there was a time for running and a time for praying. And he said, no, your grandmother knew you could pray while running.
That's a perfect life lesson right there, by the way.
Exactly.
I was, first off, I just have to say, this idea of the limitation in conversation and stories, things we find out later, or things that get unveiled, as someone who has had in my life folks who have talked about suicide and had in my life folks who were not always sharing all the stories and all the ways. The impact that has on you as an adult, how that colors your entire sort of circumstance. Even the idea of the story with the Titanic, the idea of running. I have to say, when I read about you, and you've been labeled in some things, they called you once the impatient politico.
Yeah.
You described yourself as pushy. I'm wondering whether or not, I mean, is this baked in you where the clock is ticking?
Yeah. Look, when you grow up around death, you don't feel a sense of limitlessness. You don't feel like you have all the time in the world. So, and also when you win a position like speaker and you were the dark horse, when you're the first of a community, you don't think that you're going to have that level of impact and position forever. So you want to get as much done as quickly as you can possibly get it done. And there's always, whatever that age is that you lost someone you knew, right? So my mother was 56. As you get year and year, you're not getting older. You're getting closer to that year.
Yeah.
So, I have never been patient. Working at Wynn has taught me more patience because I'm dealing more closely with people who are frontline social service staff. First in their role.
It's inherent in the work too, I assume.
It's inherent in the work,
yep.
And acceptance, right?
Yes.
Inherently, political organizing is about not accepting. It's about changing.
Yes.
But the casework has to come with no shame, no blame, which means you accept people where they are.
And this is the point where we're starting from, and this is how we're building from there.
Exactly.
I was taking a look at the city council website, the video that I think they posted first, meaning from 16 years ago.
Wow.
It's a clip of you. And guess what topic you're talking about?
Marriage equality.
No, that one's coming. We're going to get into that because I want to talk about that. Congestion pricing.
Oh, no way. That was grueling. That was grueling.
And I loved it because you said we have to talk about expanding mass transit. Wow, that seems like a topic that's come up. You said if we're going to be the business capital of the world, we have to do things differently. This is literally 16 years ago. And you said, and also we have a huge asthma problem in parts of the city, more so some in others, and we have to fix that. 16 years removed, this is still the conversation.
Yeah, everything old is new again, or deja vu all over again, as Yogi Berra would have said.
Exactly. The next video, by the way, is you talking about hunger. Food policy. You were talking about championing. We help to make sure that there's a food policy coordinator. Love that. The accessibility to food stamps, if you could use those at a green market, huge.
And also we stopped, we beat Mike Bloomberg in that he wanted fingerprinting for food stamp recipients, and we got Andrew Cuomo to say no fingerprinting. That
video, by the way, there are 2 elected officials standing behind you. Take a wild guess at the 2 council members who are standing behind you during the the food conversation, food security.
Steve Levin.
No.
Jimmy Otto.
Well, 0 for 2. Here it is.
Wow, who is it?
Bill de Blasio.
Oh, wow.
And the incomparable, the undeniable, the everywhere,
Gail Brewer. I should have said that.
I loved it. I just was so immersed in these old things and just taking a look back at the storytelling, and then that led to the same-sex marriage legislation, which you had the first go-round on this, and you talk about it in the book, too. The first go-round in this effort does not add up. And this pivots us to what organizing and mobilizing, I think, really looks like, and how you think about that now and what you've learned. But I want to highlight one thing that you said as you were talking about this. You were standing next to Governor Patterson on one side of you and Bloomberg in the other in the first sort of swing at this.
Yeah, I remember.
Which ultimately does not succeed, right? And you turned to Tom Dwayne, and you said, it's not easy walking through the floors of a legislature or from room to colleagues and being the only one or one of a few of a community asking other people to do something. It's actually quite difficult. And then you said, you have done that.
Right.
And I was thinking about you in your journey and how many times you were the one that were stepping up. And to hear you say how hard that is.
Yeah.
I mean, you're someone who was writing names of people to get to know. I think the assumption is just that you have this all figured out. You've been a master of these rooms, and it seems as though you've understood the struggle of that.
It's hard. And, look, it's hard. And it is at times dehumanizing to have to ask other people to extend to you the basic rights that they get basically just by the way they were born.
That's right.
But you have to do hard things in life. And everybody has to do hard things. These were the ones that I chose to do, which is different. I mean, ultimately, I was very lucky because other people have to do hard things they did not choose to do, that they have to do just because of their life circumstances. So I had the power and the agency of choice that, bolstered what I did. But no, look, I'm known also as a pretty good fundraiser. Every time I dial, I close my eyes and think, okay, you can do this. I put on a big fake smile, even though I'm not seeing the person, to try to pump myself up. And I just, a lot of the time, pretend I can do it, pretend I'm fearless when I'm actually quite fearful. But whether you do it or you don't do it, you're going to be afraid to do it. So you might as well do it because at least then you've accomplished something.
And on the other side of it.
And you're on the other side.
And you get through it, even if it's a disaster, or even if it's not successful.
Right. And you learn from it.
There's something you get through on the other side of it and the feeling that you have. And this is something that's come up in the podcast from time to time, folks who were leading organizations during the pandemic.
Right.
Now, interestingly, we kind of, whether we're talking about Superstorm Sandy or we're talking about 9/11, you have had a number of roles trying to navigate and respond to crisis. Yeah. If we could talk about the pandemic for a second.
WIN staff was unbelievable. Fabulous. And we have a work that's by definition interactive. You are with people. Yeah. 1. 2, our folks had to go to the shelter. I have the luxury, I didn't have to go to the shelter every day. 3, we had 250 families that were critical employees. I forget what the term they used then was, but that had to go to work. So we also, but think about that.
Essential workers.
Essential workers, thank you. Category. 250 people in homeless shelters were essential workers who, during a pandemic, the city couldn't have survived without, 100%. But they don't have homes. That's just wrong.
That's right.
So, but in addition, we had to set up makeshift school for those folks because there was nobody who could stay home to teach those children. And like that, the WIN staff got it together, got a skeleton staff set up. And in the beginning, we were foraging for masks and giving out brown paper bags to put your mask in to save it. It was wild if you think about where it was in the beginning.
The Wild West. It genuinely was the Wild West.
I remember
no idea.
Somebody calling me who knew a business leader who could get 15,000 masks from China if the plane could get in. And I called the Cuomo people to get the plane in from China from this guy in New Jersey. I felt like I was dealing drugs or something. It was crazy. But the staff responded. Yeah. And they responded with that empathy and resilience and fortitude that we talked about in the beginning. But it was traumatic because for staff because they were dealing with their own lives, and then dealing with folks who were homeless who now really felt trapped. And one of the things that poverty does to you is makes you feel trapped. And now they kind of were actually trapped. And it was just so much harder to move anybody out of shelter. But even in the face of that, they kept moving people out of shelter. I marvel at how effective it was, and also how we worked really, really hard. So if you got COVID or your family member got COVID, you had to stay in your unit.
Yep.
We would bring you 3 meals a day. We would bring you snacks. We would do your laundry. We would bring you extra books, extra, games and whatever. And we charted, on a weekly basis where we were at on the curve. And we were ahead of the city and state in breaking the curve of the spread of COVID. Now, I think, which is a good thing, Wynn is not the exception. I think most of the social services in the city responded that kind of a way.
The tremendous rallying, responding. Yeah. I mean, how agonizing this was to have had clients that died, staff who died. I was running the Stanley Isaacs Neighborhood Center.
Oh my God!
At that time.
So you knew,
But I don't know if people realize we went from a Friday doing things to Monday. Everything has changed.
Absolutely.
And we're not going to give you anything to work with.
Right.
You've got to figure it out on your own. That's not to suggest that City Gov wasn't trying, but they were figuring out how to get through the day themselves.
Absolutely.
And I think the social services, human services folks rallied in ways that both were I think it demonstrates how creative, dynamic, passionate, focused, capable, gifted the body is, and also the essential nature went beyond just doing good.
And all of the things you just said are somehow baked into the DNA of people in the human services sector. They wouldn't be in the sector if it wasn't. So when the migrant crisis happened, because of everything we learned about ourselves in pandemic, the migrant crisis at Wynn, and at one point we had 1,200 migrant families, I don't want to say it wasn't hard, but it didn't feel as hard. Because we knew we could do it because we had done it in pandemic. Okay, so now you have a bunch of people that can't qualify for SNAP or food stamps. Okay, we need to get more food. We need to raise money for that. We now are putting chicken on our Amazon wish list. Okay, we need to buy freezers. We need to get discounted freezers. And you just did what you had to do, which is, like I said, you forge ahead. But hopefully now we forge ahead in a way where we create enough of soft landing so that the trauma of forging ahead isn't as damaging as it might be if you didn't, recognize it. And even now, when the federal government, by choice, in the last government shutdown, not the one that is hopefully ending, the last one, it's hard to keep track, and they cut off SNAPs, which was a choice. We, in a 10-day period, raised $640,000 to buy gift cards to get people food, because also now, whether it's 9/11, whether it was Superstorm Sandy, whether it was the pandemic, whether, the fiscal crisis, whatever, New Yorkers respond. And I think I've come to tell myself that when I fundraise, I'm doing a service to rich people in the city because they actually want to help, but they're busy running whatever they're running, their lives, their empire, their hedge fund, and you give them the opportunity and you make it easy by asking them for money.
I appreciate your time so much. We're going to start winding down here because you have things to do and continue on supporting so many lives. But I just have to say, oftentimes in writing, I read a little bit about your dad.
Yes.
Who's with you and just a fascinating journey and story. A vet, a union guy.
Yeah.
And opening mail for you. He said you were cursed with clarity.
Yes. That the only thing I ever wanted to do was politics and organizing and government work, that from like the youngest age, that's all I ever wanted to do.
What was the first organizing thing that you remember? Because you talked about the housing tenant work, but I think early on, as a child, I think you were trying. What was it that you remember?
I was in the band in elementary school at St. Patrick's Elementary School. I played the clarinet poorly, and Actually, I never even really learned how to read notes, but I would just move my fingers and puff out my lips.
Yeah,
when
good
we
enough.
Puff
Good
cheeks.
Enough. Good
And
enough.
one year we had uniforms, and the next year we didn't. So I organized a petition and said the band wouldn't march in the Memorial Day Parade unless we got uniforms. We did not get uniforms, and I got in a lot of trouble. And then we organized another petition, letter writing drive to the bishop, because we wanted the deacon not to be transferred to another parish when he became he was ordained as a full-fledged priest. Again, he was transferred.
So what does that mean? Does that mean you don't win every fight?
You don't win every battle.
You don't win every battle.
But you learn from every battle. My friend Joanne Wilson said to me once, and she's right, all failure is feedback.
All failure is feedback.
Yeah.
That is a gem of all gems.
Right.
Right there. I do want to kind of wind us down in two things here, which is to say, speaking of taking a swing and missing the first time, and then what does it take to go from there? Same-sex marriage. Mm-hmm. As noted, in the first sort of iteration, that legislation doesn't pass. You were a passionate, dynamic speaker on this topic. I loved a couple of things that you said, and I wanted folks to remember this or hear this. You said, this is what I'm going to ask you a simple question. This is you in front of large audiences. I saw you do this in a press conference. I saw you do this on the national stage watching old videos. Look me in the eye and really tell me I deserve less. Look me in the eye and tell me that Kim, your wife, and I aren't a family, that we don't struggle every day, that we don't pay taxes, that we don't work every day for this city. No one can look at me or her in the eye and tell us that, because it's not true. What did it take to actually get to the change that you saw there?
It took a lot of work. We ran, and you know, to have the vote and to know who was a no was a gift, because then we knew how to focus. So we knew who to target, and we knew who to run candidates against. And we beat some people, but we didn't beat other people, but we ruined their summer. And we made them know there was an opportunity cost for doing the wrong thing, and we flipped votes because of that. And we made it clear that we weren't a fringe group, that we were a political force, and made it something that a governor would want to embrace as a highest priority. And I think that work, whether it was raising money, whether it was organizing a media campaign, coordinating with the governor, running candidates, what part was most important? All of it. And I don't think there would ever have been that full-fledged of a campaign if we hadn't lost. One of the things we did, I was just talking about this the other day, is we, with the help of Jerry Spire, who's the head of Tishman Spire, and Kathy Wild at the partnership, we got a letter signed of business leaders that said, we are now competitively less attractive to Connecticut and Massachusetts, and maybe soon New Jersey, because our staff does not have marriage rights. You need to pass marriage equality. And I called all the CEOs who signed the letter to say thank you. I didn't think they would call back, but I just wanted to do that. So Lloyd Blankman, the then head of Goldman Sachs, calls back. I loved this. And he's like, well, you're welcome. I don't really get it. I was like, well, what don't you get, sir? He's like, you get married, I get the same paycheck. You don't get married, I get the same paycheck. You're not taking anything away from me. What do I care? And it was so great, because it was like, I now understand the mind of the CEOs of major financial institutions. It was such a great call.
What a fascinating learning experience that is, and what a gift that is. And I hope those of you who are listening right now are pulling all the threads here in terms of what it takes to activate the human services space in particular, because I think most of the workforce development folks who are listening and otherwise are trying to figure out how to make that important, how to make that relevant, how to demonstrate power in doing that. You have been active in talking about living wage.
Yes.
And you have been active in saying, listen, if we're going to cut people's subsidies, we're putting them in a position where they're going to continue to fall off, to go under the level of poverty even further, and how harmful that is. I appreciate you championing the idea of good jobs and good wages, and how much that matters. And I guess I just want to add to that, we have to figure out how that means something to people.
Right.
Like you said, to the business executive, what moves them, what gets them activated behind something. And there's a difference, I would suggest, too, between the idea of organizing and mobilizing. I'm very obsessed with this idea of Mobilizing means I get people in a room. Organizing means I'm laying the scaffolding and the structure to activate in a number of different ways to see something change.
Right.
I guess my last thought to you would simply be to say, do you think about legacy?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot when I was speaker, because, when you're the first, there's an easy saying you don't want to be the last, but you also know that your whole community will be judged by how you do and what successes you have and what mistakes you made. So I thought about that. I think about that a lot. Recently an amazing New Yorker died, Ronnie Eldridge, and her obituaries were just so wonderful and so amazing. And she's done so much. And, you have to hope that when people look back on your life, whatever your passion has been, that you can have had a life like Ronnie's that was just so full. And, I think I've said, I hope that what people will say about me, whether you agreed with me or disagreed with me, whether you liked me or you didn't like me, that I emptied the tank, that I left it all out on the field, that I gave everything that I could for the city.
I'm wildly grateful that you were able to spend this time with us, but more important, I'm so grateful for what you have meant to this city.
Thank you.
You mean to this city.
Thank you.
And obviously what you're bringing to this city every day from here on.
Thank you.
Chris Quinn, thanks for joining us.
Thanks. It was a lot of fun.
Workforce Drop. Lots more to say. We could do more of these.
We could. I'll come back.
Thank you.
Thank you.